Mark and Lisa Granger had the perfect marriage, or so it seemed until a late-night wife-swapping arrangement with their neighbors, Tyler and Denise Corman, ended in betrayal, obsession, and a brutal murder that shocked an entire suburban neighborhood. The houses on Chestnut Lane stood in perfect symmetry, each framed by trimmed hedges and crisp white fences. Families who lived there seemed picture-perfect barbecues on weekends, kids playing catch, and neighbors exchanging smiles while watering their lawns. But beneath the polished surface, some secrets ran deeper than anyone dared to guess. Mark and Lisa Granger had lived there for 7 years. Mark worked from home as a software consultant, spending long hours behind his computer. Lisa, a second-grade teacher, was loved by her students and known for her warm, calm demeanor. They had no children of their own but took great pride in their home and their golden retriever, Milo, who was often seen jogging beside Lisa in the mornings. They blended in well, never drawing attention. A few doors down, Tyler and Denise Corman moved in just 6 months ago. Tyler, a muscular man in his early 30s, owned a local gym. Denise, his wife, ran a beauty business online, filling her social media with glamorous photos and motivational quotes. Their arrival brought energy to the quiet street. They were younger, louder, and more vibrant than the older couples in the neighborhood. Their weekend parties became the talk of the block. Music, laughter, and the glow of string lights filled their backyard as new neighbors flocked over to get a taste of their free-spirited lifestyle. Mark and Lisa were invited to one of those parties one evening. It was supposed to be a quick visit, just to be polite, but one glass of wine led to another, and soon, the four of them were deep in conversation, laughing like old friends. Tyler was charming, and Lisa found herself drawn to his confidence. Denise, with her sharp wit and bold personality, sparked something in Mark that he hadn't felt in years. They exchanged numbers and promised to meet again. In the following weeks, the couples grew close. Dinners, drinks, weekend getaways, they spent more time with each other than with anyone else. It felt new and exciting. The Grangers, once routine-driven and private, began opening up. Conversations turned personal. Talks of desires, fantasies, and frustrations filled the air. Eventually, one night, when the drinks were flowing and the music was low, the subject of wife-swapping came up. At first, it was a joke, a laugh shared across a glass of wine. But the more they talked about it, the less ridiculous it sounded. After some hesitation and long private discussions, Mark and Lisa agreed. Just once, just to explore. The arrangement was simple, mutual, and supposedly without emotional strings. That first night was awkward but thrilling. It broke barriers they didn't even realize were holding them back. Afterward, no one talked about it much, but the glances exchanged between the couples told a different story. The thrill of the unknown had taken root. What was meant to be a one-time experiment became a pattern. Whenever the opportunity arose, they repeated the swap. They told themselves it was harmless, that they were in control. It wasn't cheating if everyone agreed, they reasoned. But boundaries, once crossed, became harder to enforce. Lisa began seeing Tyler more frequently. At first, it was part of the arrangement. Then it wasn't. She met him for lunch. She began texting him late at night, even when Denise and Mark weren't involved. Her mood changed. She became more distant from Mark, less affectionate, more distracted. Mark noticed. At first, he tried to ignore it. He buried himself in work, hoping it was just a phase. But her late arrivals, her secretive phone habits, and her growing emotional distance became too obvious to ignore. He began checking her phone when she left it unattended. What he found made his stomach turn. Messages, dozens of them. Tyler telling her he couldn't stop thinking about her. Lisa replying with words Mark hadn't heard from her in years. There was affection, intimacy, and longing in their words. It was more than physical. Tyler, too, changed. He spent less time with Denise and more time finding ways to be around Lisa. He dropped by the school where she worked. He started running in the mornings to casually bump into her. Their connection had evolved into something dangerous, an obsession hidden beneath the mask of mutual consent. Denise watched it all unfold. She didn't say anything at first, but her growing silence was louder than words. Her laughter stopped. Her online posts became erratic. She felt betrayed by the very game she had agreed to play. The balance that had once kept the arrangement together had collapsed. The couples were no longer equal participants in a shared fantasy. Now, it was a web of jealousy, secrecy, and emotional manipulation. What was once exciting now felt like betrayal. Then came the turning point. Lisa skipped a planned dinner between the couples. She told Mark she was working late, but Denise later revealed she had seen Lisa's car at a downtown hotel, the same hotel where she and Tyler had once met in secret. Denise didn't confront her, but she took photos. She waited in her car for hours and watched Lisa walk out, arm in arm with Tyler. The betrayal was no longer just emotional. It was real, visible, and undeniable. Denise sent the pictures to Mark the next day. No message, no explanation, just the photos. Mark didn't respond. He stared at the images for hours. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat in his office, staring into the dark, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. He had agreed to this. He had opened the door. Now everything he thought he controlled was slipping away. Meanwhile, Lisa seemed unaware of the damage her actions had caused. Or maybe she didn't care. She grew bolder, staying out longer, answering questions with vague excuses. Mark began to track her phone without her knowledge. He installed a discreet app that showed him her movements. He told himself it was for his own peace of mind, but each notification only fed his growing rage. One day, he saw she spent over 4 hours at Tyler's apartment. That night, he didn't speak to her at all. He just watched, observed, calculated. In a neighborhood where everything looked perfect from the outside, a deadly chain reaction had already begun. 4 people had crossed a line. Now, one of them was about to disappear forever. The morning sun cast long shadows on Chestnut Lane, but something about the quiet felt different. Lisa didn't show up for work. Her co-workers assumed she was running late, but as the hours passed, concern began to grow. She hadn't called. She hadn't answered any messages. By mid-afternoon, her sister tried reaching her and got nothing. The school notified Mark, who said Lisa had left early for an appointment and must have lost track of time. But no one could reach her, and the hours continued to tick by. That evening, when her family still hadn't heard from her, they contacted the police. Officers arrived at the Granger home just before nightfall. Lisa's car was still in the garage. Her handbag and keys were inside. The only thing missing was her phone. Mark repeated the same story. Lisa had woken up early, said she had a meeting, and left. He claimed it wasn't unusual for her to go quiet during the day, but something in his voice didn't sit right with the investigators. The neighbors gathered behind their curtains, whispering about the flashing lights and uniformed officers. None of them had seen Lisa that day. One elderly woman down the street recalled hearing a dog barking for hours that morning. Another neighbor mentioned seeing someone jogging early, though she couldn't say who. Nothing was clear, but the air carried tension. It was as if everyone knew something bad had happened, they just didn't have the words yet. In the days that followed, the search for Lisa intensified. Flyers went up around town. Police dogs combed through nearby woods and empty fields. News crews set up cameras near the entrance of Chestnut Lane. Mark appeared once on camera, asking for anyone with information to come forward, but his performance lacked emotion. He seemed composed to composed. Behind closed doors, the detectives had already begun questioning everyone close to Lisa. Tyler's name came up quickly. His phone records showed dozens of messages exchanged with her in the days leading up to her disappearance. Many were deleted, but the fragments left behind told enough. They had been planning to meet. They had been arguing. One message stood out: Lisa telling Tyler they couldn't continue, that it had gone too far. When Tyler was brought in for questioning, he acted surprised. He said he hadn't seen Lisa in several days. He admitted they'd been close but claimed they'd ended things weeks ago. He described their relationship as a brief mistake, but the evidence on his phone told a different story. He had called her at least 4 times the morning she disappeared. The detectives also turned their attention to Denise. She had stayed mostly silent until now, refusing interviews and avoiding the media. But under pressure, her demeanor shifted. She didn't defend her husband. Instead, she quietly handed over a folder she'd kept hidden photos of Lisa and Tyler together, timestamps from just 3 days before Lisa vanished. They were holding hands, entering a hotel. Denise had followed them, watched from her car, and captured everything. She didn't confront them. She had waited, observed, recorded. The detectives began to wonder if Lisa had tried to end the affair and Tyler hadn't accepted it. Or maybe Mark had found out. Maybe both men had reason to want her gone. But the problem was, there was still no body. No clear signs of violence. Just a woman who had vanished without explanation. The first break in the case came from a nearby storm drain. A city worker cleaning out debris noticed something unusual tangled in the branches and leaves. It was a woman's purse. Inside were wet, ruined receipts, an ID card, and a few broken pieces of a phone case. The ID belonged to Lisa Granger. The discovery reignited the search, now focused around the storm drain area. Cadaver dogs were brought in. Officers combed the woods, fields, and abandoned sheds. But again, they came up empty. Then came a new lead. Mark's home security system, which he had claimed wasn't working, still stored some footage in the cloud. Forensic techs recovered partial recordings from the morning Lisa went missing. Around 4:51 a.m., Lisa was seen exiting the house, wearing jogging clothes. 2 minutes later, a second figure followed. The camera angle was poor, and the figure was obscured by shadows, wearing a hooded sweatshirt. But the time matched the window of her disappearance exactly. The detectives showed the video to both Mark and Tyler. Mark said he hadn't seen it before, that it didn't look like him. Tyler, on the other hand, denied being there at all. But phone tower data showed his device pinging near Chestnut Lane around the same time. He claimed he had forgotten his gym bag at the Granger's house and came by early to get it. That explanation sounded weak. Still, there wasn't enough to charge either of them. The detectives grew frustrated. Every clue opened more questions than answers. Everyone had motive. Everyone had something to hide. And the pressure from the public was mounting. As days turned into weeks, the community grew restless. Rumors spread. Some blamed Tyler, others pointed at Mark. Some even whispered about Denise. She seemed too quiet, too calculated. What if she had discovered the affair and acted on it herself? What if it was all revenge? One night, just as the case began to cool, a new piece of evidence was uncovered. An anonymous tip led police to a phone buried in a public park 3 miles away. It was badly damaged, but enough remained for the tech team to extract partial data. It belonged to Lisa. On it were fragments of text messages, including one draft that was never sent. It read, "I think he knows. I'm scared of what he'll do. I need to get away." The message was dated the night before she vanished. It didn't say who he was, but it was enough to reopen every angle. Enough to convince the detectives that this wasn't just a missing person case. It was the beginning of something far more sinister. With no body, no confession, and no conclusive evidence, they couldn't move forward with arrests. But the weight of guilt had already begun to pull at those involved. Behind smiles and statements, behind calm appearances and well-practiced answers, one person carried a deadly truth. And sooner or later, that truth would find its way to the surface. The tension on Chestnut Lane had settled into a quiet unease. Weeks had passed since Lisa Granger's disappearance, but her absence lingered in every empty parking spot, every unanswered phone call, and every cautious glance between neighbors. The flyers were still taped to streetlights, slowly curling from sun and wind. Her face had become familiar to people who had never met her, and her story was now whispered about in coffee shops and across backyard fences. Everyone had a theory, but no one had answers. Police continued their investigation, circling between Mark Granger, Tyler Corman, and Denise. Each of them carried a piece of the puzzle, but none had confessed. Mark remained stoic, rarely leaving his home except for scheduled interviews. Tyler returned to work but avoided conversations about the case. Denise, for the most part, had disappeared from public view entirely. She closed her social media accounts and stopped answering her phone. Investigators had little more than a vague video, a purse from a storm drain, and fragments of data from a buried phone. The surveillance footage showed Lisa leaving her home before dawn. The shadowy figure that followed her still hadn't been identified with certainty. Mark denied it was him. Tyler denied being near the house. Denise claimed to have been asleep. Every lead reached a dead end, but Detective Avery, assigned to the case, wasn't giving up. He believed the answer was close, buried under layers of deception and emotional chaos. He began revisiting details. Cell tower data showed both Mark and Tyler's phones pinging in unusual areas the morning Lisa disappeared. Tyler's phone had moved briefly to a wooded region on the outskirts of town before returning to the gym. Mark's showed a strange detour near a construction site where no appointments or errands were documented. Avery asked for a full forensic review of Mark's car. At first glance, The vehicle was spotless, professionally detailed inside and out. But under the lining of the trunk, a team found traces of something disturbing: tiny specks of blood. The sample was sent to the lab, and after a tense 48 hours, the results returned. The blood matched Lisa's DNA. When confronted with the evidence, Mark stayed calm. He claimed Lisa had cut her hand in the car days before she vanished. He gave the date, location, and even offered a vague description of the incident. But no one remembered her reporting any injury. No friends, no family, no co-workers. The wound he described had never been seen by anyone else. It wasn't enough to arrest him, but it was enough to dig deeper. Detectives obtained a new warrant to search Mark's devices. They discovered a hidden app on his phone, one that mirrored Lisa's GPS location. It had been installed weeks before her disappearance, without her knowledge. The app tracked her every move, every stop, every late-night visit to Tyler's apartment. Investigators followed the data trail and found something even more alarming. The morning Lisa disappeared, Mark's phone had followed her route exactly. Every step she took, he mirrored. Then, the signal from Lisa's phone went dark, cut off completely. Mark's location continued for another 20 minutes, stopping briefly in a wooded area behind an abandoned building before returning home. When detectives visited the building, they noticed fresh soil turned near the rear fence. A cadaver dog brought in to search the area began barking immediately. A shallow grave had been dug, then clumsily covered. Inside, they found human remains wrapped in a torn bedsheet. The decomposition confirmed the body had been there for weeks. Dental records proved it was Lisa. The discovery sent shockwaves through the town. News vans returned to Chestnut Lane. Neighbors wept on camera, recounting memories and regrets. The perfect street now had a murder tied to its name. Officers sealed off the Granger home with crime scene tape. Mark was taken in for formal questioning. Under pressure, he began to unravel. Investigators laid out everything: the GPS data, the hidden app, the blood in the trunk, the shallow grave. They asked him one question: why? For hours, Mark refused to speak. Then, he broke. He claimed it was never planned. He said Lisa had told him the night before that she was leaving, that she was done hiding, done pretending, that she and Tyler were going to be together, and she wanted a divorce. Mark said something inside him snapped. He followed her the next morning, waited until she was alone, and confronted her on the trail. He claimed they argued. She threatened to leave right then. He said he pushed her, and she fell, hit her head on a rock. He insisted it was an accident, but the medical examiner's report showed multiple blunt force injuries, repeated strikes, defensive wounds on her arms. A single fall couldn't explain the trauma. It was not an accident. It was murder. Mark was arrested and charged with second-degree homicide. He was denied bail. The courtroom was packed for his arraignment. Denise sat in the back, silent. Tyler never showed up. Reporters filled the sidewalks outside. The case had become a spectacle. As the news spread, more secrets surfaced. Denise admitted she had known about the GPS app. She had seen it on Mark's phone weeks earlier but said nothing. She confessed she suspected Mark might do something but didn't believe he would actually hurt Lisa. Tyler, meanwhile, admitted he and Lisa had planned to move away together. They were going to leave everything behind: jobs, houses, marriages. They just hadn't told anyone yet. The town turned inward. People stopped talking. Trust between neighbors vanished. The house where Mark and Lisa had once lived was put up for sale. No one made an offer. Lisa's funeral was quiet, closed casket. Her parents sat in silence, holding each other's hands. A teacher from her school read a letter from her students. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. In the end, the affair was only part of the story. The arrangement that began as an exploration had opened the door to obsession, manipulation, and violence. The emotional toll had turned into a physical one. A shared secret between the couples had created something unstable, something toxic. And in the middle of it all stood Lisa, trying to choose freedom but meeting death instead. What started as an unconventional escape became a path to tragedy. A life lost, a marriage shattered, and a community left haunted by what they never saw coming. The courtroom buzzed with quiet tension as the trial of Mark Granger began. Reporters filled the benches in the back, their notepads ready, cameras waiting just outside. Family members, neighbors, and former colleagues of both Mark and Lisa packed the seats, their eyes fixed on the man who had once been a quiet, polite fixture of the neighborhood. He sat still in a navy suit, eyes forward, hands folded on the table. He showed no emotion. The prosecution wasted no time. They began with the foundation of the case: the rocky relationship between Mark and Lisa, the emotional breakdown caused by the wife-swapping arrangement, and the overwhelming jealousy that had followed. They showed the court a detailed timeline, backed by surveillance footage, phone records, and GPS data. They painted a picture of a man who had lost control of his life, who watched his wife slip away, and who decided to take back control by ending her life. The jury listened as a forensic expert explained how Lisa had died. She hadn't fallen and hit her head. She had been struck multiple times. The wounds were deliberate, delivered with force and intent. Defensive bruises covered her arms and hands. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the skull. It was violent. It was personal. Next, the digital evidence was presented. Mark had installed the tracking app weeks before Lisa's disappearance. The app monitored her every movement, silently pinging her location and updating Mark in real time. He had followed her patterns, knew when she left home, where she went, who she met. He had watched her drift further toward Tyler and away from him. The prosecution argued that this wasn't just jealousy, it was obsession, a dangerous, calculated fixation that ultimately led to murder. Then came the blood evidence. A forensic investigator described the blood droplets found in the trunk of Mark's car, small but unmistakable, matched to Lisa through DNA analysis. Alongside the blood, trace amounts of soil found in the wheel well and under the car's frame matched the area where Lisa's body had been discovered. It wasn't coincidence. It was movement evidence of a body transported from home to grave. The final blow came when Lisa's phone data was shown to the jury. The unsent message she had typed the night before she disappeared read, "I think he knows. I'm scared of what he'll do. I need to get away." It was chilling. A final note from a woman on the edge of escape. A warning that came too late. The defense tried to present Mark as a broken man, someone pushed to the edge by betrayal and humiliation. They claimed the situation spiraled out of control, that he acted in a moment of passion. But the evidence showed premeditation. The secret app, the deleted messages, the disposal of the body, the silence that followed. Outside the courtroom, the media dissected every moment. National news picked up the story, dubbing it the Suburban swap murder. Podcasts analyzed the dynamics of wife swapping, how fantasy had turned into obsession. Internet forums buzzed with theories. Some blamed Mark entirely. Others questioned Tyler's role. Some even speculated that Denise knew more than she had admitted. Denise, called to the witness stand, looked like a shadow of the woman she once was. Her hair pulled back, her face pale, she spoke softly. She admitted she had known about the affair between Lisa and Tyler. She admitted she had seen the photos. She confessed she had suspected trouble, but never imagined Lisa would be killed. Her voice cracked when she said she wished she had spoken up earlier. Maybe, she said, Lisa would still be alive. Tyler never took the stand. His lawyer advised him to stay silent, but his presence loomed over the entire trial. Some wondered if his encouragement had fueled Lisa's confidence to leave. Others wondered if his distance afterward had contributed to the volatile mix of emotions that led to her death. As the trial came to a close, the prosecution delivered a final message. They reminded the jury that this wasn't a story about unconventional relationships or broken promises. It was about choice. Mark Granger had choices. He could have walked away. He could have divorced Lisa. Instead, he chose violence. He chose to silence her permanently. The jury deliberated for just under 6 hours. When they returned, the courtroom held its breath. The foreman stood and delivered the verdict: guilty of second-degree murder. Mark's face did not change. He simply looked down, as if bracing for a storm he already knew was coming. The judge sentenced him to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. He was led away in handcuffs, disappearing behind a locked door, never to return to Chestnut Lane. After the trial, the Granger house was put up for sale. It sat vacant for months, its windows dark, its lawn overgrown. No one wanted it. Children crossed the street to avoid walking in front of it. People whispered when they passed. It became a symbol of everything that had gone wrong, a beautiful home hiding a horrifying truth. Lisa's family established a scholarship in her name at the school where she taught. Her students planted a garden on the school grounds in her memory. Each spring, tulips bloomed in her favorite colors. Her parents rarely spoke to the press, but once, her mother quietly said, she just wanted to be loved. That's all. Denise left the state. She never looked back. She sold everything, deleted her digital presence, and vanished into anonymity. Tyler moved to another city and continued working in fitness, but his reputation followed him. People always stared, always whispered. In the end, Lisa was remembered, not for the scandal, but for the life she lived before it all fell apart. A kind teacher, a caring sister, a woman who wanted more from life and paid the ultimate price for chasing it. Her story became a cautionary tale about trust, temptation, and the dangerous edge where desire turns to destruction. The community of Chestnut Lane never returned to what it once was. The neatly trimmed hedges still stood, the porches still held rocking chairs, but the illusion of safety had been shattered. Everyone knew now that even in the quietest neighborhoods, behind the calmest smiles, darkness could grow unnoticed until it was too late. Months passed, but the shadow of Lisa Granger's murder still lingered over Chestnut Lane. The street, once full of life and laughter, had grown eerily quiet. Porch lights that once stayed on late into the night now flicked off early. Families who once hosted weekend cookouts kept to themselves. Neighbors who once waved across lawns now avoided eye contact. The tragedy had stained the peace that had defined the neighborhood. The silence that followed wasn't calm, it was fear. Lisa's story remained in headlines long after Mark's conviction. True crime documentaries, podcasts, and YouTube channels dissected every detail of the case. People around the country followed the updates, fascinated and horrified by how something so twisted had grown out of something so seemingly innocent. What began as a consensual adult arrangement between two couples spiraled into obsession, emotional warfare, and ultimately, a brutal murder. The story was shocking, but it was the familiarity of the setting that unsettled so many. This wasn't a back alley crime or a bar fight gone wrong. It was a murder born inside a suburban home, behind trimmed bushes and white picket fences. Denise Corman moved away in the weeks following the trial's end. She packed up her belongings quickly and quietly, her house listed on the market without a public showing. When the moving truck arrived, only one neighbor came out to speak to her, and even that exchange was short. She left without saying goodbye to most. Rumors spread about where she had gone. Some said Colorado. Others whispered about a small town up north. No one really knew. And Denise didn't leave any forwarding address. Tyler Corman stayed in town a little longer. His gym took a hit as clients canceled memberships and distanced themselves from the scandal. He eventually sold the business and left without fanfare. In the eyes of the public, he had narrowly escaped becoming a co-defendant. Many still wondered about his role, how much he knew, how much guilt he carried. Lisa had been planning to leave her husband for him. She had risked everything, but once she disappeared, he had distanced himself quickly. He cooperated with police, but his lack of emotion struck many as cold. Even if he hadn't killed her, people couldn't forget how easily he moved on. Mark Granger remained behind bars. He didn't appeal his conviction. According to prison records, he kept to himself, worked in the prison library, and rarely spoke to anyone. His name, once associated with professionalism and quiet dependability, became synonymous with betrayal and violence. He had built a life with Lisa, shared years of marriage, and yet had watched her die by his own hands rather than let her leave him. His actions had destroyed not only her life but the lives of everyone connected to them. Lisa's family, shattered but determined, tried to honor her memory. Her parents moved out of state, unable to remain in the home that reminded them of her. Her sister continued to speak publicly, reminding people that Lisa had been more than just a victim. She had been a teacher, a mentor, and a person who had loved deeply, even when that love was returned with cruelty. Her students remembered her with handmade cards and drawings, now kept in a small box at the elementary school. Her classroom had been turned into a quiet reading room, where children sat beneath a mural painted in her honor, bright, colorful, full of life. The Granger home never sold. Buyers pulled out at the last moment. Contractors who went in to renovate the house reported hearing strange sounds at night, footsteps, water running, doors creaking open on their own. Whether true or not, the stories only added to the legend. The real estate listing was eventually taken down. The grass grew tall, weeds crept up through the walkway. The once perfect home slowly rotted in silence. Lisa's murder had done more than take a life, it had shattered the illusion of control. What the two couples believed they were managing, a shared arrangement, a balance of trust and adventure, had unraveled the moment feelings grew stronger than rules. In theory, the wife swapping had boundaries, But emotions don't follow structure. Jealousy doesn't honor agreements. Love doesn't care about logic. The story haunted people not just because of the murder, but because of how easily it could have happened to anyone. It wasn't about the arrangement. It was about control, possession, the idea that someone believed they had the right to decide another person's fate. Lisa tried to leave, tried to reclaim her life, and that's when she became a target. Her desire for freedom challenged the ego of the man she once trusted. And in a moment of rage, he chose to silence her forever. True crime audiences around the world dissected the story again and again. Some blamed the lifestyle, others blamed the individuals. But the truth was, no one had predicted it would end in death. That was the most terrifying part. There were no warnings, no threats, just a sudden, irreversible act of violence. As time passed, other stories filled the headlines. New scandals, new tragedies. But for the people of Chestnut Lane, nothing ever replaced the chilling memory of Lisa's disappearance and death. Her ghost lingered not in the supernatural sense, but in the emotional vacuum she left behind. Every mailbox, every sidewalk crack, every wind chime still swinging on a porch, all reminders of a life cut short by someone who couldn't accept the truth. In the final interviews for a documentary, one neighbor said it best. They wanted excitement, but they opened a door they couldn't close. They thought they could control the rules. But once people got feelings involved, it stopped being a game. And someone lost everything. Lisa's story served as a warning. That trust is fragile. That people aren't always what they seem. That danger doesn't always come from strangers in the night, but sometimes from the person who shares your bed, your meals, your secrets. No one on Chestnut Lane would ever forget what happened, and they would never let themselves believe, ever again, that perfect lives were truly perfect. Because behind the fences and smiles and polite greetings, they now understood just how easily a fantasy could become a nightmare, and how in the wrong hands, love could turn into something deadly.